Does perspective really matter? My dear friend Nick Vipperman just wrote an incredible book, and I'm so excited for you to hear about the origin of that book, where it came from, really his thought process behind sharing it out, and some of the incredible stories that are in it. I'm so excited to hear from my friend Nick. Welcome to Belief Builders. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I sit down with individuals who have found strength, direction, and purpose through their faith. We'll look at the moments that tested their beliefs, the experiences that strengthened them, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Join us as we build our faith one conversation at a time. Welcome, everybody, to the Pillars of Purpose podcast, powered by Lighting Pros. I'm your host, Matthew Eford, and I am so excited to have a friend of the podcast, a dear friend of mine, Nick Vipperman, our senior pastor at Galilee Christian Church here in the Jefferson, Georgia area. He's written a book, and I'm so excited. But really, Nick has been somebody that poured into the podcast early on, but has been a belief builder in me. It has been influencing my life, helping grow my faith, my family's faith for several years now, and I'm so excited to have him back. So, Nick, for those who may have missed your first episode, if you're just real quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at Galilee. How long have you been there?
Yeah, absolutely. Been at Galilee for 14 years as the senior pastor, and just been a great ride. And God's really blessed us here in Georgia and blessed us at Galilee. And I tell them all the time, they're going to have to bury me out here in the backyard, Lord willing. So that is the plan. That's my plan anyway. I hope it stays in accordance with what God wants to do. But yeah, he's been really good to us here. It's been awesome to see the fruitfulness of ministry and just see what God's been up to here, and we can't wait to see what's next, really.
I love it. So you start your career has been as a vocational pastor. Did you set out wanting to write a book? When did this vision come to you? When did this goal or dream come to you?
Yeah, definitely never set out planning to write a book, and if anything, I probably made some snide comments in the past about how everybody writes a book, but it's, God will humble you like that and kind of put you in your place. And so several years ago, really had the idea for this book, and the book is called Switching Shoes, The Power of Perspective. Really, it was birthed as a sermon series and really expanded to become a book. So the sermon series that happened many years ago was a little chunk of what the book became. But the book was really an opportunity to expound on this idea that God gave me, that I really saw and really heard him speaking about some amazing moments in my life where I saw perspective on some things that I had previously missed, or in a moment I was able to see.
Okay.
And I really felt like there was a miraculous quality, and I don't use that word lightly, but there was a miraculous quality to what happens when perspective hits.
Okay.
Because we can go from, and the book talks a lot about this, we can go from being very angry to suddenly, very understanding. We can go from being sort of, ready to fly off the handle to, when we understand something differently,
Sure.
very receptive, right? When we can go from being very dismissive of a person to, when we understand something more about them and our perspective about them changes, suddenly we're again much more open to know them, to understand them, to hear from them. And to me, that is there's so few things, and the book gets into some of this. There's so few things in the world that have the power to do that and spin it on a dime.
Okay.
Lots of times we can learn or grow over time, right? Like if you give me a couple of months or you give me some years over my existence, I'm going to change.
Sure.
I'm going to grow.
Sure.
I'm going to see things differently. I might get better. I might get worse. But that's a much longer period than when something happens and our perspective changes in a moment or on an issue or for a person. where it can literally flip a switch.
Yeah.
So that's really where the book, kind of was birthed from. And then that we just develop over 9 chapters in the book, various ways that perspective speaks.
So this starts, like you said, sermon series years ago. I'm sure
Mhm.
you've preached thousands of sermons at this point in your career, and
Probably. Yeah.
you've written a tremendous amount. But how
Yeah.
cool is it that the Lord brings you back to a series that you did that was for a
Mm.
group of people at that time, that now He's
Right.
extending that out to a larger group of people, that's the audience is going to be very vast and very wide. Why
Yeah.
specifically that? Is there anything, because
Mm.
again, you've preached a bunch.
Hmm.
What
Mm.
drew you
Oh, yeah.
specifically back to this series?
I've found in my life that there's some things that God won't let you let go of.
Okay,
And when God doesn't let you let go of it, He keeps bringing it around in your mind. He keeps putting it in front of you. There's some messaging behind that we should
sure,
probably pay attention to. And as you say, I've preached a lot of sermons, approximately, let's say it's 45 sermons a year since 2007, right? Somewhere in that ballpark.
sure.
And that doesn't count when I was preaching on Wednesday nights too,
I was
because
about to
there
say
was
that
some of
that
that.
doesn't
So
count Sunday nights. That doesn't count Wednesday nights. Yeah,
yeah,
that doesn't
that
count
that would
small
add some
groups.
more
Yeah,
in, right, through the years. But and when you think about a sermon manuscript, for me is somewhere in the 2,000 word count.
okay,
So it's a lot of words. So, but
sure,
why this is a big question. And I can just say, like this, like a lot of things in my life where God keeps bringing it around, He keeps making it clear, like, hey, there's something to this. And again, I just really felt like there's something special about this.
sure.
There's something special about this power in perspective. And the last line in the book, and I hate to sort of jump all the way to that at this
No, no, go
moment,
ahead.
but the last line in the book is perspective changes everything. And I really believe that.
Amen.
When that that kept being the thing that was in my mind, that perspective really does have the power to change everything, change the way we see God, change the way we see people, change the way we experience emotions, the way we love, et cetera, right? It just has a real power. And so I think that's the thing that God kept bringing back around. And I really felt like I had to do something with it. You and I met for lunch a while back, and this was a goal for me was
Yeah,
to get this book done,
sure,
right? It had been there kind of ruminating in my mind. It had been roughed out, and finally, through a lot of editing process and got a good editor to work with, and she did some good work on the book as well to help me, you know, kind of wrangle everything and
sure.
put
Yeah,
it put it in a little more. Yeah, or just get it to look more like a book, right? I'm not naturally a writer like that, even though
okay.
I write a lot. So yeah,
So
that's really where that came
let's
from.
take just a step kind of back, Nick, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
people that listen to this that maybe God's given them a burden, and it's something that maybe they're not going to be a published author, but maybe that's what God's leading them to in this conversation. Can you kind of tell us from
Mhm.
that perspective? You have the rough idea. You kind of framed it out when we met. Gosh, that was maybe a year ago that when you brought that up.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
was
it was probably
sometime
just a
that
little
friend.
over a year ago.
Anyways,
Mhm.
you have the rough frame. You have
Mhm.
some of the groundwork of the content already written, at least the perspective of it from the sermon series. And then how do you go from that to you have a published book? Can you kind of talk us through that
Mhm.
journey?
Yeah, I think for me, as I say, so many things in my life that have been sort of like the big things that God was speaking, the big things that God was putting in front of me. One of those, and we probably talked about this in the first podcast with you, but when I was coming from North Carolina to here 14 years ago, uh, from my whole ministry life being in Greensboro, North Carolina, to here in Jefferson was such a massive shift and was such a big, for lack of better terminology, and as cliche as it is, leap of faith.
Sure.
for us and our family that, it was scary. It was all these things following a long time pastor and coming here. So I say all that to say the thing that God keeps bringing back to you like that, the thing that he keeps saying, because when I first saw this opportunity, I thought, well, you'd have to be crazy to go do that. Or why would I ever want to do that? I was happy where I was,
Sure.
all that stuff. But I think in our prayer, when we're praying and we're connected to God and we're actively listening and we're receptive to his voice, well, it's like anything else. We're much more likely to hear it,
Sure.
right? If we're listening and we're actively listening and we're receptive to somebody saying a thing, then obviously we're more likely to hear it. And so what I kept hearing before I came here to Galilee was God being like, you need to do this. You need to do this. And I would just be like, yeah, no, I'm good. No, thank you. No, thank you. Right. Until it just keeps resonating in your mind long enough that he doesn't let you leave it alone.
Yeah.
Right. And it was the same thing with this book. I poked around at this book for a while and just thought, yeah, that's not really going to go anywhere. Yeah, that's not, no, I don't really have it. No, there's not enough there. No, it's not worthwhile. I did all that stuff. But God just kept putting it in front of me. I was like, nope, this is what you're doing. Nah, there's more there. Here, develop this a little more. Here's a thought. Here's an idea, right? So I just think, for anybody, the receptiveness is being receptive to the voice of God in that. And, hey, good advice. Do what God tells you to do, right? I mean, pretty simple
Yeah.
in that moment. So, yeah, that, from there, just the work of editing and putting in the time is how, of course, it becomes a book, right? Like, I had a good rough idea, but it was rough, right? It
Sure.
needed a lot of work, finished product as a book,
Sure.
and
And so
then putting it into the
somebody write
hands of others.
you
So,
you write a manuscript. Someone hears that and
mhm.
they're like, yeah, I've written 20,000 words, 100,000 words, whatever that may be. And then you take that to
Mhm.
someone who that is their job, is
Mhm.
they're an editor,
Mhm.
and then they whittle it down and they cut a bunch of fluff out. Am I correct in that? Is that an assumption? Can you tell us what that process was like?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the editor you work with. I worked with an editor named Melinda Ron, and she's not local. She's up in the Pennsylvania area, but she works with a lot of Christian authors
Cool.
and publishers. And so, with her experience, she was really able to walk through with me on a Zoom call or two like this. Okay, here's what you have. Basically, I sent her my rough manuscript. She
Okay.
says, here's what you've got. Here's some things I think we need to have you work on. And she restructured some things as well. Basically, the way we formatted chapters and all those kinds of
Cool.
things. And then some ideas that needed to be further developed because in a lot of
Nice.
cases I had
Yeah.
ideas, but I didn't have writing,
Okay.
right? Like I said, okay, I like this idea, but, I like this text, I like this scripture, I think there's something there, but I don't know exactly where that's going to go, right? So she's like, yes, that's good. Or, okay, maybe not that. Or let's take this scripture and why don't you move it to this chapter because it'll work better over here than here,
Nice.
right? So it's really her input in it was really good, just to help me get it, developed within those kind of that framework of organization
Sure.
and even right down to the reviews at the end of each chapter. I had a few of those, but I wasn't. This is a good example. I wasn't finishing all of my chapters the same way. And she's like, "Well, this is
Oh,
a good
nice.
idea
Yeah.
that you
Cool.
have here
Yeah.
with these reviews. You need to go in and finish all 9 chapters with basically a review
Cool.
or some questions to ponder, right?"
Sure.
And so we do that in the book. There's a final page on every chapter that really gives you an opportunity to think through some questions yourself, to kind of process what we just talked about in that chapter and put it to sort of work in your own mind.
I love that. I love that so much. And
Mhm.
what a
It's
really
a
cool
helpful
way
process.
to land the plane on each chapter, that
Mhm.
it gives the audience,
Mhm.
the reader, something to digest to make it more applicable. So you go from that, you go through the editing process, and you think I'm ready,
Mhm.
and you publish. and now you're how far out? When we're actually recording this or put this in line or come out sooner than normal, but you're a
Mhm.
week from publish, I think, something like that.
Yeah, we officially had a publishing date of this past Friday, and today is Tuesday. So we're,
Nice,
4 days
coming up
into,
on a week.
yeah, yeah. So it's, yeah, getting close to a week, and the reception has been great, and I've been really encouraged by hearing from some mentors that I sent books to, and getting the feedback from them and the folks in our congregation, and I think I'm most pleased with the fact that others really are grasping onto this idea of the power of perspective.
Yeah,
Like, okay, there is something to that, right? And then, it
sure,
almost makes you feel like, okay, I'm not crazy.
sure.
You know, I,
Yeah,
maybe I'm a little crazy, but this idea is real. Like when you lay it all out there, you kind of experience it afresh, you
sure.
know, and I think that's an encouraging part of it.
I love that so much. And when I look at, there's so many things in my life where my perspective has changed. And one that comes to mind
Mhm,
is I used to travel a lot for work and would get on
mhm,
planes multiple times a month. And uh, anytime there was a crying baby, that's why I have these headphones. They're noise canceling.
mhm,
I was like, man, I just hope I'm not sitting close to that baby. And then I took one of our sons. Well, I took Walker on his first plane flight, and he cried. And I was like, "Oh wow, this is very different." And anytime since then, when I hear a crying baby on a plane, it doesn't bother me at all. It's more of there's
right.
a lot more empathy for that person because I've lived that experience. So I love that
Yes.
perspective change. So when you look at your book, talk us through
Mhm,
how it's going to help people change their perspective or have a perspective shift.
mhm,
Someone who's listening to this and they're like, I'm looking for a new book. I want to pick it up. We're having the Amazon links. We'll make sure we put all that in the show notes. But talk to us about
mhm.
how the application comes into play for us.
Yeah, I just think that the book forces you to really look at, and and again, it's kind of those 9 chapters. I'm grabbing them because I don't remember all 9 chapters by heart, but through these 9 chapters, it really pushes you into that place where you're having to stop and to think about, okay, wait, God really does work through, not just perspective, but humility, and I'm looking at all the chapters, priorities and relationships and all these various things. And then through the stories, I think it's the stories that are in the book that when you can see some practical applications, because I try to be a pretty practical person,
Yeah,
a lot of the high-minded stuff is fine, but okay, what does this mean to me here down on the ground where I'm living every day? I give a couple of examples in the book. The book opens with a story, and I don't want to spoil it too much because it's maybe my favorite part of the book. But I open with a story about being in a hurry as a pastor right around Christmas, trying to find a parking space at the hospital to go see a guy that was in our church at the time that was very near to passing away. And so I've
okay,
got and I was supposed to go run errands and do some Christmas shopping and all this. So I'm trying to squeeze all this stuff in, and
sure,
somebody steals my parking space, and that is was made me very angry.
sure.
However, if you read the book, you'll see that God does something very powerful there with perspective that helps 100% like this change my anger to quite a different emotion.
I love that.
I tell another story, and this one's more like a parable, not a true story. But imagine that you are a 1920s or a 1930s housewife, and you've baked a pie and you set it on the window to cool, at your little farmhouse. I assume this was a thing that really happened and
Sure,
not just in movies. I don't know. But you do this and you set it in the window to cool, and you go and you're about your day doing a few other things, and you come back to the window and the pie is gone. And all of your work and your effort, and you are just beside yourself. You're angry. You can't believe it. Somebody's stolen this pie. You look out further back by the hen house in the backyard, and you see a little boy that's eating the pie. And initially you're angry until you get out and you get a closer look at him and you see this kid is skin and bones. You can tell that this is maybe the first thing he's had to eat in a couple of days. And suddenly your anger shifts to empathy,
Sure.
right? It is those kinds of things that are frequent within the book. A lot of the stories I use are just true examples that God has given me. That's one that isn't. But yeah, so I think through those illustrations and through scripture, because we look a lot at scripture in this book. But I genuinely feel like this book is a good book for people that are, already Christians or are not, and are just maybe curious, right?
Cool.
Or, are sort of open to some of these ideas. I think that there's something good there for everyone because I think, again, perspective is there for everybody to take hold of.
I love that. And so is it formatted in such a way that you would encourage, like, say, a small group, if they're saying, I'm looking for a new resource in the new year, 9 chapters, 9 weeks, that'd be great for our small group to go through.
Right.
Is it kind of formatted for that, or is it mainly for just the
Yeah,
individual or the
a hundred
couple?
percent, 100%. Because basically, with every chapter, there's some scriptures to study. There's some thoughts to walk through that are a part of that, and then there's those reflections at the end of each chapter that I think the group can kind of use as well, or the group leader can use as a touchstone to say, hey, let's talk through some of these, reflect through this chapter, what God was teaching us through this. And I think in every one of the chapters, people are going to bring their own stories
Cool.
and sort of some of the ways that it resonates with them, moments in their own life where they've seen, perspective change their priorities, as a for instance,
Sure.
or perspective change their relationships, as a for instance. I had a good friend from college reach out to me today, just kind of out of the blue, and say, hey, man, I just want you to know that our preachers group, he's over in Eastern North Carolina. Yeah, I just want you to know our preachers group is using your book in our February study. And I was
Yeah,
like,
cool.
wow, that's awesome, man. That this group of preachers, and I know a few of them, but I don't know the vast majority of them, and they're going to be in the book going through it together.
I
So
love
that's
that.
it's humbling and awesome. I tell you, this is a funny part of this whole writing the book thing is that it is a very scary thing to put a book out into the world,
Sure.
as saying, hey guys, read my book. And when you put it out there, you're like, I don't know if anybody's going to find this interesting. They may come away from this saying, you're the worst author I've ever read. That your book is good for, starting the fire in the fireplace. Like, I don't know how that's going to go, but it has been very encouraging. I heard from a good friend and a mentor through the years this morning, and he said he read the book on his flight, going from one place to the other, and had some nice things to say about it. And I just thought, wow, just the fact that anybody thinks this thing is
Sure.
worthwhile, it's humbling because again, it's very scary
Sure. It's
putting it
it's
out
very
there into the
vulnerable
world.
for you to say, this is what
Yeah,
I believe,
big
and
time.
I believe it in this way. And writing is such a unique form of communication, right? Because you and I can have this conversation and we can dialogue back and forth. And if you say something that's confusing to me, I can ask you in person, what do you mean by that? Or do you really
Mhm.
mean that? Or I disagree with you in that. But when you write, it's just that. This is what I believe, and now you've got to go and take it,
Yeah,
and you've got to interact with it.
it's there forever.
It's there.
It's
It
there
is there
forever.
forever.
Yeah.
So, do you have
There's a
any?
temporary nature to even sermons. You preach a sermon every week and
Sure,
think, well, you're putting yourself out there all the time. But even with that, there's some part of it that's sort of there that day, and then might have a few days of carry, and then man, we're all on to what's God saying next. So
sure.
book is a little different than that.
So when you look at this as a resource, right? Because as a
Mhm.
pastor with a pastor's heart, like your desire is changing people's perspective and getting them that,
Mhm.
as you said, the last line of the book. Um, are you looking to do additional resources? Is there a small group content that's going to come after this? A study guide? I know you just finished the book, right? So I'm not trying to put too much on you, but is that kind of
Mhm.
your is that your next step in this, or is it I feel God gave me this? I got it out there, and I feel very confident in what it is right at this point, and I feel no clear direction moving forward.
Well, it was definitely the latter initially. It was like, oh, I got this thing published, and like, okay, I'm done, But I've had several ask about the small group curriculum side, and so likely I'm going to give myself a couple of weeks because you beat the finish line. You're like, okay, let
Sure.
me let me have a
Yeah.
break now. But I do expect that we will do a small group guide for the
Cool.
book at
Yeah.
some point.
Cool. Very
The
cool.
book itself is a relatively short read, just over 100 pages. So I think a study guide will be relatively easy to do and
Sure.
can help a group kind of walk through it, maybe develop a few more of the ideas a little further to put it out there that would be slightly different than the book itself, but still be guided by the chapters in the book. So
And
yeah,
do you have
it will
in,
probably happen.
I like that. I like that you're not fully committed to it, but that you're leaving it
Yes,
open to
I'm
the
not fully
possibilities.
committed.
I love that. So
Whatever
somebody
God
reads the
says to
book
do.
and they want to, is there a community? Is there an online community? Is there a Facebook group or something that they can get connected to kind of hear more stories, how people are changing their perspective? Is there any kind of resource like that out there?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. Yeah, so on Facebook, we do have a group, the Switching Shoes Power Perspective group. They can simply search it, or they can message me on Facebook, or email me at nick@galilee.org. I'm sure we're going to have all the info in the show notes and whatnot. But they are more than welcome to find me there and come into that group. I think that group is public; should be no problem for them to join up. And yeah, that's a place where one of the main things I'm encouraging people to do is, of course, share about the book, review the book. If you do read it, review, because that helps when you review on Amazon. Um, it really helps get it out there to other
Sure.
people. But in that Facebook group, that's where we're encouraging other people to, hey, share your stories about perspective.
I love that.
Share what you're learning about perspective. What's God speaking to you? How have you seen these ideas in this book become real to you in ways maybe you weren't seeing before you read it? I just get excited thinking about the kinds of things people are going to share and the things they're going to discover. And I'll be sharing a few additional stories on there as well. Although I don't want to share them all because you never know. There
Sure.
might be a Switching Shoes, the Power of Perspective part two
Sure.
down the line.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know what God will do with that, but I will be sharing some as God gives them to me on that page as well.
And it'd be really cool, that community, to help as additional resources come
Mhm.
from this book. Maybe it's a book series
Right.
or small group content, but there's going to be some additional stories to share of how this has impacted people, because perspective matters so much, right? And
Yeah.
I love that you've written it. Congratulations for getting it over the finish
Thank
line.
you, brother.
There's a
I
lot of people we
appreciate
say
it.
on this podcast. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of wanter authors. I don't know how to actually say that, but effectively, there's a lot of
Right.
people who want to be an author. They want to be a published author, and they have not done the work. And so you
Right.
did the work. Congratulations! I'm excited for our family to be able to read it and to talk about it. Hannah and I and the boys, and I look forward to the additional content, hopefully, that will be coming out from it. Um, so again, give us the book. Who's it for? Where do they find it? Give us just kind of a rundown real quick as we kind of wrap up, Nick, all that information.
Absolutely. So basically available on Amazon, Switching Shoes, The Power of Perspective. You search that on Amazon, it'll pop right up. It's going to look like that. And it's also available on Kindle. So I know quite a few have downloaded and used their Kindles, and that's a great format as well to be able to access the book. But they're in Kindle format and then in paperback format. And Amazon is definitely the easiest way. If you hear this podcast and you're a Galilee member, or you attend Galilee as part of our Galilee family, they have copies there. Our elders have been kind enough to make some copies available there to the church family at our welcome desk. So try to just make that as easy for people to access as possible.
I love that. What a really cool resource. Well, brother, thank you for doing this. Thank you
Of
for being on the
course.
show. Thank you for your support of the community over the years. But thank you for following the burden that God gave you. And I'm so glad that He
Yeah.
didn't let you let it go. And I'm very excited to
Mhm.
see what continues from it, the stories that get shared, the way that God draws people closer to him. And so I'm excited.
Thanks so much, brother. Really appreciate you having me on.
Of course, man. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today on Belief Builders. We'll see you soon. We're so glad you could join us on this episode of Belief Builders. We hope today's discussion has strengthened your spirit and encouraged you in your own journey of faith. Be sure to follow along for more uplifting stories. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share this podcast with friends and family. Let us know in the comments if there's someone whose faith journey you would love to hear. We're always eager to share more stories that inspire and uplift. Until next time, keep building a faith that guides your decisions.